here with the legendary Mike Greenberg, and we're here because, well, we want to talk sports, but also the book Got Your Number is dropping, and we're here to talk numerology specifically, as well as a few of the latest bits of sports news. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's nice to be with you.
The New York Yankees, my personal favorite team, dominate the early portion of this book significantly, because I don't know if there's a more famous team in terms of, using up all the single digits than the New York Yankees. And Derek Jeter shows up first. He grabs number 2, and he's your all-time number 2. At what point did he clinch that honor for you?
Well, so it's very, very, very hard for me to say, because by the time we had the idea to do the book, his career was over, and we were able to sort of view it in its totality. Derek Jeter is in the book. Let's go backwards quickly. Let me explain exactly how people get in the book. So there was a day when a bunch of us on the Get Up staff were sitting around, and we were having a conversation like the bunch of sports geeks that we are, and about how interesting it was how many Hall of Fame quarterbacks all wore the jersey number 12. Bradshaw, Staubach, Stabler, Greasy, Namath, and Jim Kelly, and then soon to be Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. And someone in the room said, yeah, Greeny, they all wore the number 12, but who owns the number 12? And that's when the light bulb went off over my head. And I've always wanted to do a sports book, but I never had what I thought was a good enough idea. This seemed like a good enough idea. So with outstanding research from my right-hand man, whose name is Hembo, we chose the 100 athletes, or in some cases teams or coaches or stars, that own each of the numbers. Who owns number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4? So that's the context of what you're asking me. Jeter, I guess the only way I can think of to answer your question is that he was an easy choice for number 2. Now, Derek Jeter defined baseball for a generation. There are almost every sport is generally defined by a player or a team or both, generation to generation. The disproportionate number of those players in baseball history would be Yankees. But if you go back, certainly Babe Ruth defined baseball in the 20s, and for me anyway, DiMaggio in the 30s and the 40s, and Mickey Mantle in the 50s and the 60s. And then along came Jeter in the 90s and the 2000s. And even as the Yankees, even after they stopped winning World Series year after year, he continued to be the face of the sport. And one of the points that is made in the book is that, let me actually read it directly so I make sure I get it verbatim right. It's right near the beginning, so it's easy to find. He was the face of that. Let me find it for you here. As of this writing, so when we wrote this book, which was early last year, so 2022, Derek Jeter remains the most popular player in baseball, according to the ESPN Fan and Media Intelligence Group, 6 years after he played his final game. So when we poll people, when we at ESPN put together our data, and we're trying to find out, well, what players are resonating and what teams are resonating and who do the fans like, 6 years after he finished playing, Jeter remains the number 1 answer to who is your favorite baseball player. That's remarkable. So I don't know that I can tell you exactly when he clinched it, but I can tell you that he was as easy a choice as practically any other number was.
I also feel like I'd be remiss. You mentioned Babe Ruth sort of being the first Yankee to own the sport. In the book, you call him the originator of swag. And I just don't want to trip past that without mentioning how refreshing it was to hear that.
Well, so because you're referencing all these ones that are very beginning, it's easy for me to find them. I think that's right. Like Babe Ruth played in a sport that is legendary for, even to this day. I mean, people, they don't want you to bat flip. They don't want you to pimp home runs. They don't want you to celebrate. And Babe Ruth was a showman. Babe Ruth was famously self-aggrandizing. And I tell the story at the beginning of the book of how he made more money than the president. And when they asked him that, he said, why not? I had a better year than he did, which was inarguably true. Babe Ruth also, to make this point in the book, he endorsed underwear, candy, sporting goods, Wheaties, shaving cream, razor blades, and chewing tobacco toured in a vaudeville act. The ballpark in which he played most of his career was commonly known as the house that Ruth built. And when the Japanese troops were charging U.S. soldiers in World War II, they were yelling, "To hell with Babe Ruth." He was the most famous American. He was more famous. He was more identifiable with America to our enemies than the president was. So that's who Babe Ruth was. And so he was the first larger than life American sports superstar. And, that's not to say that there would have been no Muhammad Ali and there would have been no Michael Jordan and there would have been no, insert legend here or there. Someone would eventually have been the first one, but he was. And he was another easy one. In fact, we joke sometimes, Hembo and I, we didn't have to spend any time discussing 3, 23, 42, or 99. Those were the four that we knew before we even started.
Huge upset for Aaron Judge on number 99, but I think I understand where you're coming from.
Here, I will say this about Judge. You write a book and then you have to turn it in. You do what's called putting it to bed. The two athletes that if we had more time, this is not making an excuse, it's just the reality of the situation. We handed this book in way before Judge's season finished last year. And in fact, I make a reference at some point, every statistic and record in this book is relevant as of such and such date, because there were active athletes in the book. Steph Curry's in the book, Kevin Durant is in the book, a few others. If we were writing the book today, I would have found a number for Judge, probably 62. It wouldn't have been 99, but I probably would have given him 62. And then the other one I would have had in the book for sure is Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes in this 1 year solidified his place as a legitimate all-time great. I think it certainly felt like it was trending that way, but a year ago today, which is right around the time that we handed the book in, that would have felt premature to me. It wouldn't now. So if they gave us two mulligans, if the timing were such that we could, literally write the book and then just press send the next day, I would have Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Judge in it.
Yeah, it definitely reads as a living diary in parts, especially the Steph Curry chapter you mentioned, where you're sort of like, hey, he's carving out a new finals legacy as we speak. I'm figuring out the best way to handle this.
Yeah, we did that last. We waited to see if he would win, which of course he did. I believe that was the last chapter that we wrote because we were waiting. So that's when we handed it in. So, okay, so what was that? June. So that's when we finished the book. So before the NFL season had started and long before we knew that Judge was going to hit 62 home runs. So there was they were like holding it for me. I was like, I got to wait on Curry. I got to wait on Curry. I got to wait on Curry. So they were ready for me, and I was just sort of holding them at bay. So that is exactly, now that you say that, you remind me, that's exactly when we handed it in. It was June of 22.
Was number 12 the toughest numerical decision in the book when push came to shove, or was there another number where you really went down to the wire? Or were you able to make the decisions relatively easily? Because like you say in the book too, it all does come down to you.
Well, 12 was not actually that hard. I mean, like 12, there are a lot of great players, but there's no way not to give it to Brady.
Yeah.
So many great quarterbacks, including my personal favorite player that ever lived in any sport is Joe Namath. But I can't sit here and make an argument that Joe Namath is a greater player or his magnitude is greater historically than Tom Brady. Brady is the most accomplished football player that ever lived. So that number was easy. Some of the numbers that were really hard, I'll give you 21. Have you read all the way through it? Do you know who we chose for 21?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then this isn't going to be as much fun for you, but for anyone listening to this conversation, I'll ask you to think about this. 21 is Tim Duncan. 21 is Deion Sanders. 21 is Roberto Clemente. That was a tough, agonizing decision. And I know that some people will disagree with the choice that we made, and that's fine. So that's why, here's what I'll say about the book. The book is equal parts sports debate and sports history, which is to say that there were a lot of tough decisions to be made. I made them. You will agree with some and disagree with others. hopefully if you and your friends read the book, you guys can then debate where you think we got it right and where we got it wrong, and you'll start disagreeing with each other. And that is great fun. And so there's the debate piece. But then there's also the sports history piece, which I actually enjoy the most. When I was growing up, I loved reading sports history. And there is not as much of that, I think, as there was when I was young. So if you read the book, whether you agree or disagree with the choices that we made, I absolutely promise, I guarantee that you will at least 100 times in the book, meaning at least once per chapter, you will say, wow, I didn't know that. I promise. And so there's the history part of the book. So that's what it is. It's those two combined. So the debate piece of it, 21 was a brutal number. 4 was a brutal number. 4 is Brett Favre. It's Bobby Orr, and it's Lou Gehrig. And that was a heart-wrenching decision to have to make amongst those 3. Actually, I mean, Favre is an all-time great, but he was sort of easy to put to the side. He was a definitive third in that group. But choosing between Orr and Gehrig was incredibly tough. So that's what, those were the really hard numbers. There were a few others that were hard too. I'm just looking over the list here, trying to remember some of the others that we kind of agonized over. Those are the 2 that always jump immediately to mind.
And I will not spoil 21 either for the listeners and the viewers. You got to get the book yourself. But yes, that stands out as a tough one too. In the, to follow up on both Favre and Namath, and switching gears a little bit, Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets remain in the news. Who knows how long this protracted trade conversation will go. But he has declared his intentions. How confident are you that the deal ultimately gets done? And how confident would you be, maybe if you didn't have the baggage of lifelong Jets fandom?
I actually am confident that the deal eventually gets done. My only concern is in the timing. So I believe, despite my own natural pessimism, that it will get done, and it will get done before the draft, and then there will have been no harm done. So that'll be fine. Once we get past the draft, the Packers then are in no rush. If we get past the draft and the deal has not been done, then the Packers, there is no benefit to them to doing it more quickly. They don't have to pay Favre the $58 million that he's guaranteed until the first day of the season. And they actually have some salary cap benefits in holding off on it until June. At that point, it would start to worry me, because I do start to wonder when we start reaching a point where it impacts his ability to be great this year. I mean, this is a 1-year thing. To approach this as though we're going to have Rodgers for more than a year, I think is a mistake, because this is a guy who just said in his most recent interview, he was 90% retired when he went into the dark room. So I think to sit here counting on any more than 1 year from him would be a big mistake. So you got to maximize the 1 year that you get. So long as it happens before the draft, everything is fine. If it doesn't, and it starts, working its way towards training camp, then I think it does start compromising his ability to be great. And that's when it starts to become a real problem. I don't expect that to happen, but if it does, that could be really bad.
I apologize for laughing. I laugh every time the darkness retreat is mentioned. So to hear it in a completely normal context-free sentence, I was just like, oh, right. Yeah, he did go in a darkness retreat.
I love it. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I'm intrigued by it. It's the stuff that he's into, not all of the stuff. I've never used ayahuasca or considered it in my life. I have no interest in the Panchakarma cleanse, which actually just scares me to death when I read about it. And there are any number of other things that he is into that I'm not. But I will say that I am also one who believes in meditation and mindfulness and things like that, which I don't find them weird at all. I think they're very normal, beneficial practices. Mm-hmm. And the darkness is just sort of that to the nth degree. The truth of the matter is, and I don't know that I could handle it for as long as he did it, but I am intrigued. The reality is that our brains are so stimulated all the time in ways that they really were not designed to be. They're designed, your brain is designed to be shut off and legitimately resting sometimes. And we just generally almost never do that anymore. There is almost never a time when we are not, at least one of our senses is not being activated. And to actually shut off all light and practically all sound for a day, 2 days, 3 days, I think would actually be very healthy for your brain. Now, is it weird? Yeah, of course it's weird. It's weird because it's not something that practically anyone would do. But I actually don't think it's a bad idea. So, Rodgers is a different breed of cat, right? He's an unusual guy, and that's fine. I don't, not everything about it I love. The way he handled his, in the blatantly dishonest way I thought that he handled the whole thing about his vaccination status last year. Like most people, that whatever your position was on vaccine mandates, I can't imagine anyone thinks that lying about it was the right way to do it, purposely misleading people. But look, at the end of the day, I'm not inviting him to dinner. He's coming to be the quarterback of my football team. And he gives us the best chance to win that assuming he shows up and is good, the best chance to win that we've had in my lifetime. So I am all in.
What do you think the ceiling is? If you're envisioning it as a 1-year thing, what leaves you, are you satisfied with anything short of a Super Bowl after the year is up?
I mean, I guess no. I mean, like the ceiling, as Michael Jordan once famously said, is the roof. Do I think that they have a real chance? I actually do. The AFC is so loaded. It was like a murderer's row of quarterbacks. So to project any team in that conference, be it Kansas City, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Miami, the Jets, the Chargers, the Jaguars, to sit here and say any one of them is a prohibitive favorite, I think is just wrong, because I think they have a chance to all be really good. And the quarterbacks have a chance to all be really good. And I think Denver will be much better with Sean Payton. I think Cleveland will be much better with Deshaun. I think New England will be much better now that they have an offensive coordinator. So there are a lot of real, and who knows where Lamar Jackson is going to wind up. So there are, the AFC is just freaking loaded. But I would put the Jets right there with basically anyone. If Rodgers is there and playing reasonably well. I don't see any reason why they don't have a legitimate shot at accomplishing everything. And I do think anything short of that could be painted as a disappointment.
And you touched on my final NFL question. Lamar also sort of floating in the ether right now. I saw you float the Patriots as a potential destination the other day. Do you feel like that is a realistic one? And if not, what are the destinations that you're really targeting while we sort of watch everybody stand on the sidelines for now?
I think it is reasonably realistic. So to be clear, it was Rob Ninkovich who really brought it up. I sort of took the ball and ran with it, but it was he, the former Patriot, who put that thought in my head, because I'm thinking, if you're the Ravens and you're going to trade Lamar Jackson, what do you want in return? One of the things you would then not have is a quarterback. And so maybe you'd be interested in Mac Jones. If the Patriots were to get Lamar Jackson, they would clearly have to jettison Mac Jones. No two players' skill sets could possibly be less similar. So Mac Jones as Lamar's backup wouldn't make any sense to me. So it seems to me Mac Jones and the 14th pick in the draft, which is where the Patriots pick in round 1, that's sort of an intriguing possibility as compensation. One of our insiders today, Jeremy Fowler, said he didn't think that was enough for the Ravens. Maybe not. Maybe you throw in a 3 or something like that, a conditional pick into the future. But that seems like one that makes sense. And I think the idea of Belichick and that coaching staff, and frankly, the team that they have, they're a really good running game with Ramondre Stevenson, and they always have a good offensive line, it feels like, and they've got 2 good tight ends, and Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. That I could see that being a really interesting possible destination. Look, there were almost no teams in the NFL that Lamar Jackson wouldn't make markedly better. I don't think that has anything to do with why the situation is where it is. I think it is all about the league's owners holding fast on their desire never to guarantee contracts. But he would make almost, look, I mean, unless you're Kansas City or I don't know, maybe Philadelphia, Cincinnati. I mean, how many teams out there wouldn't be better for having Lamar Jackson as their quarterback? So there's not too many places that wouldn't make at least some sense.
Mike Greenberg, I really appreciate your time with us. Thanks so much for joining. The book, of course, is Got Your Number. And would you ever consider doing a follow-up book on the worst player to ever wear each number? I feel like that's probably the logical next step.
No, that's an interesting one. The one thing that I wanted to get into the book, and it just got too long, was for each number to give a list of some of the other intriguing options. So people could, and this way, when you read it, you have to kind of think to yourself, who didn't we use? Because they're not all that obvious. And it just would, the book is long enough as it is. It just would have gotten to be too much. But that is a book I could see doing someday, or some sort of corollary where we put in some of the alternative options. But your way I kind of like better. I hadn't thought of that, but maybe I'll pitch that and see if we get any bites.
It's yours if you want it. The disrespectful version of this book, Mike. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun.